Good morning, Jonathan.
Good morning. It is morning.
It is morning. I can't believe we're recording in the morning. This is this is
It really,
interesting.
really gets you going.
Seriously, I've got my coffee because so help me. Yeah. It's gonna be a good episode, but it might take a little more effort to get through this one. If you made poor decisions last night and you know it, clap your hands.
I hope that was in time. I'm sure it wasn't.
It wasn't. No, it's fine.
Well, this is 30 something, okay?
Yes, this is something. But we agreed to it, and so here we are.
Yeah, we're dedicated to the show, and I'm excited about what we're talking about today.
I am too. So this episode, we're talking about the Kentucky Derby. The Kentucky Derby is in May, so it's coming up here pretty quick. And why not honor and bring some recognition to the African Americans that really were the first jockeys to bring on the Derby and really make headway and kind of learn about their journey. So the first Derby day. Popular writer Oliver Lewis rode H.P. McGrath's Thoroughbred Aristides to victory in the first Kentucky Derby on May 17th, 1875 at the Louisville Jockey Club. 13 of the 15 jockeys in the Derby, including Lewis, were African Americans. The Kentucky Derby was begun by Meriwether Lewis Clark, a prominent Louisville citizen who developed the Louisville Jockey Club. Clark began construction on the racecourse in 1874 on land leased from two relatives, John and Henry Churchill. He patterned the Kentucky Derby after the English classic, the Epsom Derby. The Derby now runs annually the first Saturday in May at Churchill Downs and the oldest consecutively held thoroughbred horse race in the United States. The Kentucky Derby, the Preakness, and the Belmont Stakes comprise the coveted Triple Crown of U.S. horse racing. In 1773, the College of William and Mary sponsored a survey of the area that eventually became Louisville. That eventually became Louisville, site of the Kentucky Derby. George Rogers Clark settled there in 1778, and the town named for Louis the 16th XVI. 16th for Louis XVI of France was organized in 1779. By the early 1800s, Louisville became a major port serving both Midwest and the South. During the Civil War, it was a key supply depot for Union troops. Every May, Louisville hosts the Kentucky Derby and the acclaimed horse show at the Kentucky State Fair. Another part of the Kentucky Derby Festival is a steamboat race on the Ohio River between Louisville and Jefferson, Indiana.
Now, there's so many different layers in that description that I think could get their own historical overviews. But the part that's obviously most interesting to us is that most of the jockeys, at least in the beginning of the Kentucky Derby, were Black people. And this was new information to me. And honestly, I mean, we'll start off with one of our first questions. What is your relationship with the Kentucky Derby?
Oh, we're doing questions out the bat. Okay.
Oh, yeah, we're going to start here. We're going to start here.
I don't really have a relationship with the Kentucky Derby. Like, I recognize it. I know I've been invited to a friend of mine. They've had like a party every year. And so I've gone to their place and just kind of been there. I know that people usually wear the hats and the nice dresses and, that kind of thing. Like that definitely comes to mind. People betting on horses and betting on the races, but I have no real relationship with the Kentucky Derby necessarily. It just kind of is something that, wasn't really in my life.
Same here. I found out, I feel like I learned a lot about what I'll call white culture, which is not an appropriate term, but I found out a lot about these things that honestly Black people have just kind of been boxed out of through working in the beer industry, which is so I'm going to say it again, white culture. It's, there's baseball and there's shooting deer and drinking beer. And then there's Kentucky Derby, and that's part of it. And there's the big hats, and there's the mint juleps, and there's the gambling, and there's the highfalutin, like big money thing. And none of that ever signaled Black to me. Yeah. And so when I started to figure out or learn some of the history about the Kentucky Derby, it was really interesting to me that we were part of the very beginning.
Right.
Now, obviously, it's not as romantic. It's not like, oh, I just wanted to race horses and I got to race horses. A lot of those first jockeys for the first several years were enslaved people who were riding and kind of riding for a sense of freedom. Like they obviously didn't get freedom even if they won, but they got some liberties along with being an athlete that did a great job for the public. So
I actually have a question or clarification for you though. If like the end of the enslavement period in 1865, how were these previously enslaved people that kind of continued essentially in that realm because they didn't have a choice?
Yeah, it was like this is how they could make their living by working in the stables. But working meant what? Like it meant slavery.
Yeah.
So that's hard.
Not officially, but it's there.
Right. So it's so depressing to even think about that, because here we are supposedly in like a Reconstruction period, right? And there's the ability to be a stable hand and like go and be an equestrian of sorts. But really, if you're looking at it for what it is, it's you're enslaved, and there's not really a way out of it for you. But they at least had the games. But and this whole thing came up not just because May is when the Kentucky Derby happens, but it's because of an event that happened to me. I'm calling it an event. How dramatic. An experience that I had just casually driving to meet a friend at a bar. There was a house that was along the road that had a statue that was chained to their garage with security cameras around it. And it was what I consider just a blackface statue. I'll have to send you the picture that I took. And it was really jarring. And I took a picture and I posted it on social media. And through that, some people were like, oh, that's called a lawn jockey. And I then found out about the Black history of the Kentucky Derby through this. So we'll talk about the lawn jockey in a minute. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about the beginning of the Kentucky Derby. So the first winner was Oliver Lewis, who was a 19-year-old native Kentuckian. And he won the very beginning, which to me is also crazy. I remember learning about there was like a boom in horses when I was young in the early 90s. You remember this? It was like Black Beauty and the Horse Whisperer and Seabiscuit came along, like all these stories of jockeys. None of them were Black. And so much of the popular history of jockeys and what we consider to be the sport of equestrians, right? The riding sport was based on the history that was laid out by young Black men. And they are not in these stories at all.
And it is interesting because it's, we talk about even our last podcast episode with Cameron, talking about the music industry, right? Like we have really paved the way in terms of different genres. And now we don't associate certain genres with Black people. So if you think about like country or rock or, heavy metal, kind of like those the things that get influenced by us, we don't have that same presence in those genres or maybe association with those genres as we did previously for whatever reason. But I think the story of James Wingfield, who also won races in the Kentucky Derby, is going to be telling in a little bit of insight into what that looks like and how it happens. So James Wingfield, he won the Kentucky Derby in 1901 and then in 1902. In 1904, he decided to leave for Europe. He met John Madden, who was an incredible trainer, saying that he would ride for him, and then eventually he kind of took it back. He reneged on what he promised, and then he basically was made to be an outcast in the community, in the riding community, with most trainers not taking him on. He then went on to race for an Armenian oil man named Mikhail. I think it's Mikhail Lazarev. Together, they won dozens of major races in Poland and Russia, where racing was booming. In the US, the boom had kind of settled. Racism was more outward, anti-gambling sentiments and financial problems closed 250 tracks across the US, which is why Wingfield decided to go elsewhere. Then the Russian Revolution hit, and he was able to escape as part of a large caravan that fled on foot from Odessa to Warsaw, a 1,000-mile journey. He landed in France and reestablished his fame as the best rider in that country until he retired in 1930. Somehow, it was as if he were safe from the evils of racism in France. But then after retirement, he became a trainer and set up shop in Maison Lafitte. Someone's going to correct me on the correct pronunciation of that. That's my best French, knowing English and Spanish.
Okay.
But wait, so it didn't end there. Nazis done came to France, forcing Wingfield back to the US, where reality hit. No one remembered him, and Black people weren't racing anymore. In the racing world, essentially all he could be was a stable hand or a groomer. Then he went back to France along with his son Robert and reestablished his stable. In 1961, the Kentucky Derby honored him and rekindled his story. The kicker, though, at first, he was denied entry to the event due to the color of his skin at Brown Hotel for a banquet. And I'm not sure if the name of the hotel is ironic considering the circumstances, but anyhow, so they let him in, but he was treated awfully the whole time. In 1974, Wingfield passed at the ripe old age of 93 in Maison Lafitte, France.
He was pushed out. 1974. Oh my God. We are in the history. 1974 isn't long enough ago for me.
It's not even 50 years, not quite 50 years ago.
It's just insane, but that is a tale as old as time. Also, so many horrific world events happening in the middle of that, on top of your identity being attacked at every single turn. Oh gosh, the things that these our ancestors had to go through just to be able to play a sport or be able to have a skill that is, admired. You have to run. And there's also an interesting thing, the Black flight to France. I know that
James Baldwin did that too,
Josephine Baker. I mean, the list goes on.
Yeah.
I do. Maybe that's a different episode where we can learn more about what the differences between European Black life versus American Black life is. I know that for queer people, a lot of the times it was for safety and freedom there, but it's just interesting and sad that people had to flee so hard when they were already winners right here.
Exactly. But it's really telling about, what that experience was like. Again, 15 of the first 28 derbies were won by Black riders. And I mean, you can't deny that history and how they had such a big impact on the sport. But then in 1904, that's when Black riders were banned from racetracks. So they really didn't have, much of a choice. And so, I mean, it sounds like there was some workaround. I don't have the exact details on that because there's a note from 1921 to 2000 that no African-American riders were in the Derby until Marlon St. Julian, who re-entered basically in reestablish a presence of Black riders in the sport.
Mhm.
But we still, I mean, that's 79 years of no association of, or sort of continuing that legacy of Black riders in the sport who really took it off. And at this point, that's why we don't have an understanding of what
Mhm.
our presence was, and or maybe have a connection to the sport. I love horses, like I think they're beautiful and magnificent, but horse racing was never something that I was introduced to.
Yeah, because of that long that long time of Black people being
It's a lifetime.
separated from the sport. Yeah.
Mm.
I also think I saw a quote, but I need to double check.
Mm.
But I believe that St. Julian also said that he didn't know about the history of Black writers. Yep.
Mm.
It said that St. Julian, who admitted during an interview a few years ago, I need to double check what year this was, that he didn't know the history of Black jockeys and started reading up on it. Recently, he reached out and he said, I hope to be a role model as a writer for anyone who wants to race. So
Mm.
unfortunately, he had to start from scratch because our history had been erased. But that is, again, a tale as old as time, a tale as old as time. Now, are you thinking that with this knowledge, you're going to engage with the Kentucky Derby in a different way at all?
Know if I will, but I mean, Gray loves horses. Like he enjoyed riding when my in-laws were down a couple months ago, and he enjoys, getting to be on them. And so, if that were something that he wanted to pursue, Kentucky Derby aside, like I'm open to him doing that and riding with him like that. I think that would be fun. But I don't know. Maybe I'll tune into the Derby coming up this year. Out, party aside, but maybe I'll tune in and like I don't know. It'd be nice to get dressed up and have a nice little hat or something like that. Like I'm all for it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love a costume and a theme. And I feel like I
Mhm.
also, after just learning a little bit about this, there's so much that we don't know. But I think there's a little bit of reclamation that I'm interested in engaging with. Like, I really want to be a part of it in my own way. And I would love to see if maybe there's some riders of color, some jockeys of color that are able to be in there, if not Black people, just something. Because in my mind, the Kentucky Derby is so white and it's so exclusion. Like it's just going to be white. And I hope that in 2023, it's looking a little different. I don't have high hopes for Kentucky, unfortunately. Shout out to Kentucky. I'm sure y'all are great. I do not have high hopes, there's that. But I also want to move to the lawn jockey because, as I mentioned, this was a jarring experience seeing this figure in someone's lawn. It's of a young Black boy in blackface, the red lips, the black skin, wearing a jockey's outfit. So like the riding pants and the little jacket, and his right arm is outstretched to hold a lantern for the lawn. And it was seeing it in person was just shocking, and the way that they had it displayed with the camera guarding it and chained to the garage, it made me it filled in some gaps. It was like, okay, so people have talked to you about this, and you are putting this out there to be defiant to
Mm.
whatever people have brought up towards that statue or to you. And another thing that's a little bit heartbreaking about it is that this family, they are white people. Their grandchildren are mixed kids
Mm-hmm.
that come over and play basketball next to the statue.
Yeah.
So that's another thing. But I started to get into the research about the jockey because I was like, maybe I'm missing something. Like, obviously the imagery is straight up racist, but maybe I'm missing some sort of significance that could be saving it. I'll have you all know, spoiler alert, no, still doesn't work and they shouldn't have it on their lawn. But the lawn jockey actually comes from what is now considered a myth It is a statue of an enslaved person, a slave child, whose name was Jocko Graves. And the legend holds that the conductors of the Underground Railroad used these lawn jockey statues to help guide people to freedom. And this is a debated thing. They were saying that the original Jocko Graves story was that he was, a young African American boy who served George Washington during the Revolutionary War. And as Washington planned to cross the Delaware into Trenton, New Jersey, he told Jocko to keep the light up and just wait for them to come back. And apparently he did as he was told, and he froze to death. So that's where the lawn jockey statue originates from, in the position of where the kid allegedly died. Right. So in a way, the conversation turns into conversations about respectability, what's expected of Black people in the South. And the thing is that there's documentation that a child died in his name, or he was called Jocko Graves. That is true. But whether or not this story actually happened is hotly debated, because there's no documentation of that. Also, the Underground Railroad signifier, some of the suggestions are that the statue would be on the lawns of houses that were safe, and they would put a green ribbon on the lawn, the lantern hanger, to say it's okay to come in right now, in a red ribbon to say it's not safe around here, which that code is paper thin. So a lot of people are like, maybe that's not true. And also there's no documentation of that in any of the biographies or autobiographies of enslaved people from the time. So this code and this story and the statue have all this history attached to it. However, there's no confirmation. And so a lot of people are thinking that this is part of the myth making of the South to kind of reclaim their stories after losing the Civil War. Like they're just trying to rewrite some things to say, like, we have these honorable Black people and this is what Black people should be doing. And they have these statues built. We've seen it in parks, where people became heroes suddenly. All of this retelling of history, all of this myth making was to help advance these lies about experiences during slavery times in the South. And so that's kind of where the conversation is right now around the lawn jockey. But I will say something that did happen was that people brought up that, this is just racist. Like, we don't need to do this. So the companies that produced them, and they are still produced today, they switched it from the Jocko Graves character, the blackface character, to a young white boy. So now you may see lawn jockeys on people's lawns with blonde hair, blue eyes, or brown hair, you know what I mean? Green eyes, whatever. They switch up the painting, but occasionally you will still see those vintage blackface characters of the faithful groomsmen, Jocko Graves. So there's a lot going on there. There's also a book about this that was written in 1963 called Jocko, A Legend of the American Revolution, which again comes from that moment of Southern storytelling to kind of reframe experiences. And it's like the Jocko story is a story that we've heard in many different ways, because what it is saying, well, some slaves had it good. Some slaves were treated nice, and some slaves were really loyal, and they were treated nicely. They even got statues made of them. Or did you just make a racist statue because you didn't feel any kind of way about it?
Right.
And the 13-year-old boy died, and his name was Jocko, and you're tying it to this character, and now in 2022 you have it in your lawn, and now in 2023 we're talking about it on a podcast. Is that maybe what's happening? I encourage you all to kind of investigate what you see a little bit further because I could have just driven past that and just let it slip my mind. But from this, I kind of got a little bit more of knowledge of what it might have been like in the midst of Jim Crow, when stories were being pushed out and retellings were being told and people's real life stories were being manufactured into stories to kind of guide respectability or subservientness or whatever the goal was for Black people in that story. And it turns into this racist lawn character next to a gnome, next to a light up deer. You know, it's a lot to take in. So I encourage everyone to look up The Lawn Jockey, Jocko Graves. The story, personally, just from seeing historians kind of debate about this, sounds like BS all around. And I don't think that there is a way to talk about the sports or honestly the equestrian lifestyle, if you just want to put it all around, without bringing up the amount of racism and the amount of labor by enslaved people in that, and how Black people were integral to the development of the industry, right, and how they've been completely left out.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I was thinking about, the blackface of it, right? We know that, at least for us, we know that it's wrong. We know that it is historically from a place of a way to demean the culture, our people. For those listening who aren't familiar, for whatever reason, if you're not familiar with blackface and why it's a problem, so this goes back to the early 1800s, when the first minstrel shows were performed in New York. These are by white performers with blackened faces. They used burnt cork or shoe polish to paint their faces. They wore tattered clothing, and they also imitated and mimicked enslaved Africans on Southern plantations. These performances characterized Blacks as lazy, ignorant, superstitious, hypersexual, and prone to thievery and cowardice. Thomas Dartmouth Rice, known as the father of minstrelsy, developed the first popularly known blackface character, Jim Crow, in 1830. By 1845, the popularity of the minstrel show had spawned an entertainment sub-industry, manufacturing songs and sheet music, makeup, costumes, as well as a ready set of stereotypes upon which to build new performances. So these are all depicting Black people awfully, right? And so for that to go from the show, which, we know to be a really poor representation of who we actually are, to then be sort of, memorialized in a sense in a statue, to have, blackface there, or even the dolls, the like the little toys, like things like that. There are other ways that they're depicted where we talked about Birth of a Nation in film. And I mean, these are like permanent things. And it's not that it should be erased. It's just more so understand the history behind it. And why it has continued to sort of penetrate our society and where we're at now, because of the way that people want to hold on to those things and not really like honor the people that, it's frankly just offending. We're not lazy. Like, how are we going to build a country and then you go tell us that we're lazy? You know what I mean? Like, how does that compute?
It's not working for me. The map isn't mapping for me.
No.
It's also, it's not only just permanent, but the thing that really gets me and it really stands out with the Lawn Jockey is that, and also with the Mammy character, it's instructional. It is from a racist white lens to say, Black people, if you want to be immortalized, in a statue, be like Jocko. Be just like Jocko. Our president loved Jocko. He loved him so much that he abandoned him and let him freeze to death. And he was so good that we made him a statue that we're putting all over the lawns. And allegedly, it's helping you through the Underground Railroad, which now we're kind of okay with. These are lies. These are lies. And they're instructions to keep people afraid. Afraid of bucking against a system. And bucking, terrible choice of words, but you know what I'm saying? Like,
it sounds like their attempt to justify and to, no, it's okay. Like, right. But there's representation or, like just a really, really awful way to try and make it to gaslight, I think, right? Like, or, to kind of change the perception, change the, to change your perception of what reality is and to make you question what you're actually seeing or what you're actually experiencing. Like, don't gaslight us into thinking that blackface is okay and blackface on a statue is okay. And because this enslaved kid was loved so much that, it's a jockey and the way that he died was okay because look, we love him. Noble. No, right. Mm.
And this is all also, I don't know if I even said this at the beginning of talking about the lawn jockey, but it's not even to hold a lantern. That's not the purpose of the statue. The statue is to make a post where you tie your horse and outside. Cute. They were like, this will be cute. Like, what? It could just be a vertical post and call it a day, but it had to be all this extra in order to do all the other things that racism needs it to do. And just like you said, like with all the blackface and salt and pepper shakers, we had blackface, like it was just permeating, and that was entertainment. My aunt, who passed away, she was big on history, African American history. And she developed kind of an appreciation, I think, for some of the blackface depictions. It's hard for me to talk about it because it's intricate and she's dead, so I can't ask her exact thoughts. But she had pictures of pickaninnies, the children with the bows and the big red lips and things like that. She had art that depicted that in her home. And I always used to be afraid of it. And she would talk to me. She was like, this is not okay because white people did this. But this is also sometimes the only way that Black people got to see themselves in art, And so she was kind of just explaining to me that some of this will sting, but this was also a lot of how we were represented. And so it's important for me to have this and not someone else, that is going to have this in a different way. And so I kind of have been, obviously our lens is going to be different. I wasn't born in the 50s, so I wasn't that close to seeing that kind of imagery more popularized, but having a relationship with blackface in whatever way it is a developing thing for me because I don't want to erase our history, even though I know that it's bad. I think contextually, I also understand it as all we had, which really sucks. Like, it really, really sucks that is all that people got to see. It's complicated here.
Especially when we've briefly mentioned, I believe, internalized racism. Maybe it's not been on the podcast, but maybe we've had, other conversations about internalized racism. And that can be, this is how, blackface was portrayed because they were portraying Black people. And that's how we are. No, that's not how we are, know? And so then if you then project that onto other people and that look like us, and you treat them in a way where it's like, it's like they're coming from like, well, I'm the okay one. Like, I'm not you guys. That's all, and so that sort of internalized racism, that's how that continues. That's how that's perpetuated through those sorts of blackface, whether it's the people in film or whatever, to, the little trinket that you pick up at the store. Like, that's how that continues. Something you mentioned about your aunt, and you know how she had some of those items in the art in her house. There's a friend of mine, his brother was collecting these pieces, the blackface pieces. And I remember going into one of the antique stores locally. I mean, tons and tons of stuff in there. It was very old. And they had some of the little Mamie characters, little, like tiny little ones, like statues based or whatever. In there. And so I sent him a picture like, hey, like this is here, because the intention of that, the collection is to have a museum of like, this doesn't need to be sold, but these are the items of blackface that have been distributed previously, to preserve that of like, listen, this wasn't great, like, and we're not going to change the narrative and make it seem like this is okay. But I thought it was interesting in the same way that your aunt approached it of, well, we have to see it and we have to know that it existed because otherwise we don't know. Right. Otherwise we have us not knowing about the Black influence on the Kentucky Derby, you know? Right. You know, you erase it or you redirect the narrative and then it's like, who knows? And then you have another, now we know.
Okay. Right. It's such a weird experience to look at things so logically because we can completely understand the context and everything. And then we have to also take into account our emotions to that. And that's where the complication comes in. But I also I don't have a collection, but I thrift enough. Thrifting is one of my passions. And when I see certain items that are racist and from a time, I sometimes will bring them home. Like I have this album. I believe the artist is Al Jolson. He was a white man who had a little bit of vibrato, so he sang the blackface in vaudeville, of course.
It's giving Bobby like Caldwell. Just kidding.
It's giving Bobby Caldwell. But he, was a famous blackface singer, entertainer, and I have this like double disc, like mint condition LP that was so popular when it came out. And I had to get it because I was like, who else would be buying this and why would they buy it? You know what I mean? And like these items, personally, I think that if you do see those items out, I think if you're Black, get them. I wish that white people would stop selling them for hundreds of dollars on Facebook Marketplace. Like, why are you trying to profit off of this? Yeah. But I also think if you're not comfortable with keeping it in your home for whatever reason or being part of that internal private storytelling within Black circles, there are also African-American history museums that would love to have these products or have these items for their exhibits. And even there are grassroots organizations that will have a display. And we need to have our history kept and we need the truth to be told, or else we run into, like you said, a Jocko Graves retelling of some story that turns into a different coded moral thing that like Black people are supposed to learn. And it's like, this is not, we can't trust these stories from these people. They're not reliable narrators. Right. So it's anyway, yeah, it's a lot. I have a lot of emotions about it.
As you should, and it's okay. Like the emotion stems from a place of, at least for me, it would be like disappointment and like heavy sigh, like, come on. Yeah. Like it just, it's jarring every time. There's always something. We're always learning something. And oh my God, it can be painful. It really can be a painful experience.
It is. And just the learning about all of this and thinking about all these concepts came from me driving to meet a friend at a bar. So when people are like, why does everything have to be about race? I'm like, you tell me.
Because it is.
I was trying to go have fun. I was trying to have fun.
And now I gotta already is.
Do this. It is.
I'll tell a brief story about an experience that my general manager and I had at a restaurant recently. So we're out doing sales calls, visiting clients, and it's like, okay, let's grab lunch before we, go go back to the hotel. So he's like, oh, okay, like I want to take you to this place. It's awesome. I take my family here all the time. Like it's a solid breakfast place. So we go, and the second that I walked in, it was a feeling. And we know that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
People, if they don't ever have experienced it, they don't know what the feeling is. But it's a feeling of you walking to a place and all eyes are on you. And it's not that you're doing anything, you're just existing, but eyes are on you. And the place isn't very busy. It's like kind of one of those breakfast lunch places. They're probably open from 6 to like 2. And so I don't know, it's what, 12:30 or something. And so we sit down. They're not very busy. It's like a Wednesday. And I'm like, this doesn't feel right. So he goes to the restroom. I'm still sitting at the table waiting for anyone to greet us of the staff that's around. That was, a plenty to be able to offer a beverage or like bring a menu, anything. And that doesn't happen. So he comes back, and then I'm like, okay, well, I'll go to the restroom. I go to the restroom. I come back, and miraculously there are menus and waters. I was like, wow,
amazing.
Look at that. And so then I noticed that the server that was assisting us had on this Trump hat. I was like, this is weird to have like a Trump hat in your establishment. You know what I mean? Like at work, like sure you can wear it, but at work seemed weird to me.
Yeah. Is that your flair? Your Make America Great
right.
Again is your flair? Okay.
It turns out that's part of their uniform. Yeah. Yeah, it's part of the uniform because I saw, so it was like Trump 2020 and then, and not the typical MAGA hat, but it looked a little different, but it still said Trump 2020. And then like on the side below it was the name of the restaurant. And I was like, oh, this is part of your uniform. Wow. And
oh my God.
Believe what you're going to believe, like, or support whatever, but that still seemed bizarre to me in your establishment. Anyway, and I had mentioned to my general manager, I was like, it's weird that he has that hat on. And at first, he was like, oh, forget it. Like the food's good. Like it's, whatever. And so I was like, yeah, but that's weird. And then I was like, oh, and then I had pointed out like, oh, it's actually part of the uniform. And so then, anyway, time goes on and we're just chatting about work, like whatever. He's like, yeah, so-and-so has been here, pointing out, some of the people in the restaurant. And he's, been there so many times. And so we're getting ready to leave. Actually, no. So he had a coffee. I had water. My water was clearly like half full, if that. But the server only offered to refill my GM's coffee and not offer to refill my water or just do it, And I mean, I note that because I'm like, just what? Like, can I get a refill? Like I shouldn't have to ask. It might be small, but it's still a thing, right? And amongst the feeling that was already established from when we had walked into the place. So then we get the check. I had asked for a box to take, something to go. Server never gets it. And he's just off like frolicking, over on the side. And again, this is not a busy restaurant. So then my GM waves down one of the other servers, like, hey, can we get a box? And then she like looks at us and was like, yeah, like it was like the most blatant, like, why are you bothering me kind of, yeah. And she grabs a box, she brings it back. She basically like tossed it on the table, like just so like flippant in the delivery of that. So we leave. And my GM was like, what the fuck was that? He was like, that's the most fucked up thing I've ever, you know what I mean? And so then it just spawned into this conversation surrounding, listen, this is an experience that we truly have. This is not like something that's made up. And I was already fragile that day. I had a tough morning, like really early and whatever. And so I kind of cried a little bit because I'm just like, just tired. Like,
yes, I just want to eat.
Yeah. And like, the conversation that we had before we even got to that restaurant was like, sometimes I just feel like I'm a convenience for people and I don't really get seen for who I am. And like, it was this whole thing. And so then for that to happen, it was like, that was their power in the situation of not bringing the waters, not refilling the waters, not bringing us menus, not bringing the box, like throwing, you know what I mean? Yeah. And just the intent, like you just can't explain it to truly like convey that feeling when all eyes are on you. And for my GM as a white man, I know, like, and he's, chair of a certain committee that we have, I'm trying to be discreet, of a certain committee that we have, and we're on a DEI committee at this organization. And so he wants to be part of the cause, but I don't think he really grasps the intensity or the understanding of like what we actually go through. He's just like, well, people are people. People should be able to live. And I'm like, but do you actually understand what that experience is? And like, granted, it sucked to have to go through it, but he now has a better understanding from experience of what it can be like for us. And it's not like it's like that everywhere, but it happens often where it happens
so often.
Yeah, you just know that feeling, the looks, the energy that has surrounded you and the eyes that are on you, and you were literally doing nothing. And I don't know, I kind of move with that pressure of like not wanting to accidentally do something. One of my biggest concerns is ever leaving a store and the buzzer go off.
Oh my God. No, please. I tiptoe through the sensor with my bag, like open my receipt in hand. Because I don't want any confusion about why this buzzer may be going off. I check out with a person, so I have a witness. You know what I mean? Like all these things. Yeah. And I just want to go to the store and get out just like everyone else, but it's different for us.
It is different. We are not trying to steal anything. Don't get me wrong. I mean, are people trying to, yes,
even if it's accidents.
But it's like, it's not going to be us. Like you and us, you know what I mean? Like, it's not like there are so many people who do, but I'm not doing, I promise, you know what I mean? Like, and it's such a weird feeling.
I'm especially not about to do it.
Right.
Because it's going to be harder for me to make it out of this misunderstanding than somebody else. Yeah. It's everywhere. Yeah. Damn, that restaurant's uniform was Trump. And then it's also like everybody who supports Trump. And again, believe what you want. I don't care. It's good. And wear the shirt so I know not to come around you. But there is a single circle Venn diagram of Trump support and racism. And I know that racism feels like the R word for people that they don't want to hold on to. Just like the people who have the Jocko character on their lawn don't want to say they're racist because they have a Black daughter-in-law and mixed babies. But like, that's racist as fuck. And it's in the same circle. And you can't separate the two. And you have to tell me why, because I'm here to eat breakfast. So it's not for me to have to dig into. You have to tell me why that is.
Well, my GM's not taking his family there anymore. He was going on a tirade, which I thought was not kind of funny, only because I'm like, he is fired up. You know how many people he called after that? He was like about to turn into I say Vegas so-and-so, because he spent like 30 years in Vegas, like running poker rooms or whatever, and working with some sketchy people, and I'm like, he knows somebody who knows somebody.
Hey, but I mean, also like that is the first time it happens. I know it's a jarring experience. Like my husband is white and he knows the difference between service with he and his family and then with me and him. Like we went out to our favorite restaurant. It's walkable and everything, but it was for my best friend's birthday, a Black woman. And I had my other best friend there, another Black woman. So it's me, 2 Black women, and my husband. And the way we got served at our favorite restaurant, completely different. Yeah. And it's like, I know that's going to happen because we have 75% Black people, but the conversation didn't go on after, because it's like, why was it like this? It's like, because we're Black. And that's a
Mhm.
dumb reason, but that's
Yeah,
the reason.
absolutely.
So the way that that story made me feel hearing about your restaurant experience is kind of what I imagine the experience of going to the Kentucky Derby would be, or going to these Kentucky Derby events. And it kind of reminds me of when I first learned about the Kentucky Derby. Again, it was through the beer industry. So these are people that I worked with all the time. Oh, come on, Jonathan, we're having mint juleps. We're going to do this, then the third. And it was like, I couldn't explain to you how excluded I am from this because you don't see why I should be. But there are so many people at that event who do not want me there, even though this is an event that was only made possible by people like me.
And popularized by people like me.
Speaking of that, let's do our last question and get out of here. I want to know, what sport would you like to see Black players or Black leagues like emerge and like maybe not dominate, but you know how we do. But like, what sport would you love to get into because of Black people taking part in it?
That's a tough question. Because I associate the things that we already do with what we do well. You know, if you like soccer, and football, like they can have that back.
Yeah, football. Have the concussion all you want. Y'all.
Yeah. I mean, basketball is great. Like baseball, we've got a presence there, but maybe not as much. So maybe I would say that. Something like lacrosse. You know, my sister played lacrosse briefly growing up. Don't see a whole lot of that in general. I feel like, you know, that's not a super popular sport. I mean, track and field, you know, that's dominated for sure. But I don't know that I have one where I'm like, no, I wish I could play or like whatever. Cause at least the sports that I play that I'm interested in, like tennis, softball, there is presence, you know, and I'm happy with
which is great.
Yeah.
Which is great and hasn't always been true, especially with tennis and like golf and like country club sports.
Yeah.
The one I'm thinking of immediately is fencing. I always get excited in movies and TV when I see a Black fencer, and I'm like, I know nothing of the sport. It's so hoity-toity. I know that there's so much exclusion, but I would love to see Black people in that sport, you know, and like, that would be cute. That would be cool.
Yeah. I didn't think about that one.
We'll Google it once and be like, here's this Black league taking over. But like, I don't see it. It has to come to me. And once it comes to me, then I'll be satisfied with the amount of Blackness and popularity. Yeah. But you got to make it through a few barriers here because I don't even watch basketball. So my algorithm then...
You don't sport much though. Like
I don't sport at all. But so I love...
That's a big barrier to break through.
Yeah. But I love the idea. And I would really love to see Black fencers. And now I want to see Black jockeys. So I'm gonna watch from afar from my TV screen. But I think I'd like to have some sort of Kentucky Derby relationship forming because I want it reclaimed so bad.
And this upcoming Kentucky Derby is on the 6th of May. So everyone, you know, if you feel so inclined to tune in and check it out, I mean, maybe we should. Why not? We might as well
drink a mint julep.
Yeah, we might as well just give it a go.
All right, Donna, it's time for Now You Know.
In the same vein of people who are not given credit where credit is due, my Now You Know is about the lesser known history of African American cowboys. Few images embody the spirit of the American West, as well as the trailblazing, sharpshooting, horseback riding cowboy of American lore. And though African American cowboys don't play a part in the popular narrative, historians estimate that 1 in 4 cowboys were Black. The cowboy life came into its own in Texas, which had been the cattle country since it was colonized by Spain in the 1500s. But cattle farming did not become the bountiful economic and cultural phenomenon recognized today until the late 1800s, when millions of cattle grazed in Texas. White Americans seeking cheap land and sometimes evading debt in the United States began moving to the Spanish and later Mexican territory of Texas during the first half of the 19th century. Though the Mexican government opposed slavery, Americans brought slaves with them as they settled the frontier and established cotton farms and cattle ranches. By 1825, slaves accounted for nearly 25% of the Texas settler population. By 1860, 15 years after it became part of the Union, that number had risen to over 30%. That year's census reported 182,566 slaves living in Texas. As an increasingly significant new slave state, Texas joined the Confederacy in 1861. Though the Civil War had hardly reached Texas soil, many white Texans took up arms to fight alongside their brethren in the East. While Texas ranchers fought in the war, they depended on their slaves to maintain their land and cattle herds. In doing so, the slaves developed the skills of cattle tending, breaking horses, pulling calves out of mud, and releasing longhorns caught in the brush, to name a few, that would render them invaluable to the Texas cattle industry in the post-war era. But with a combination of a lack of effective containment, barbed wire was not yet invented, and too few cow hands, the cattle population ran wild. Ranchers returning from the war discovered that their herds were lost or out of control. They tried to round up the cattle and rebuild their herds with slave labor, but eventually the Emancipation Proclamation left them without the free workers on which they were so dependent. Desperate for help rounding up maverick cattle, ranchers were compelled to hire now free, skilled African Americans as paid cowhands. Right after the Civil War, being a cowboy was one of the few jobs open to men of color who wanted to not serve as elevator operators or delivery boys or other similar occupations, says William Loren Katz, a scholar of African American history and the author of 40 books on the topic, including The Black West. Free blacks skilled in herding cattle found themselves in an even greater demand when ranchers began selling their livestock in northern states, where beef was nearly 10 times more valuable than it was in cattle inundated Texas. The lack of significant railroads in the state meant that enormous herds of cattle needed to be physically moved to shipping points in Kansas, Colorado, and Missouri. Rounding up herds on horseback, cowboys traversed unforgiving trails, fought with harsh environmental conditions and attacks from Native Americans defending their lands. African American cowboys faced discrimination in the towns they passed through. They were barred from eating at certain restaurants or staying in certain hotels, for example, but within their crews, they found respect and a level of equality unknown to other African Americans of the era. I mean, how beautiful is that, right? Like, they found camaraderie. They really had, that community of herding cattle and traveling together. And granted, of course, there's going to be that existence of some hardships to overcome, but they did it. And they really were kind of that representation of cowboy of the era. And we're not really seeing that now like we used to.
No. And I love the fact that there were Black cowboys that kind of created this culture that has, of course, become so anti-Black.
Right.
And it's interesting how this continues to happen. But as we learn more and more of the history, I mean, there are at least 40 books, right? Like, about it.
Yeah.
And we get to see things like The Harder They Fall, which talks about real historic Black cowboys in a fictionalized story. But their stories are going to continue to be told. I can't wait to see 20 years from now how much more is uncovered and how many more stories are told. Because it's deep. It's so deep. We built this country for real.
And even the term cowboy has like some racist origins, right? So originally, white cowboys were called cowhands, and African Americans were pejoratively referred to as cowboys. So African American men being called boy, regardless of their age, stems from the enslavement period and the plantation era in the South. So just calling someone a boy, it's you're basically calling them the N-word, and so it has that that connotation to it, or the extra layer. And so that's why they were called cowboys. And so, at this point, everyone's called a cowboy, in that sense, or it's, very definitely more popular than cowhand. I would argue that cowhand is not being used or outside of like the actual ranch or something. But yeah, it's what a history that has been changed. And, that narrative is similarly to what we talked about in the main piece about the Kentucky Derby, the erasure of Black influence. And we're here to, we got some magic marker, and we're uncovering the history.
Absolutely. Well, Donna, thank you so much for recording this morning. This has been a lot of great conversation, a lot to dig into. I hope that the listeners also enjoyed this. And look around and then question and a little bit of research. I bet you it'll lead you somewhere Black. I bet.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Jonathan. Actually, maybe morning's not so bad. I don't know.
I agree.
And now you know. Of course, you guys, we will drop all of the links to the sources and resources that we have used for the production of this episode in the show notes. So be sure to check that out for the content of the episode, but also for our Now You Know segment.